The following is a presentation of Geekster Media.
Remember that show back then? Remember that show? Turn on the TV, time was always flying. Why did they have to end? So many shows you forgotten. Now that we've got a podcast, we can release all the shows from our hands. Yeah, will you be the most TV dudes you'll ever listen to? As long as we keep on talking sitcoms and cartoons from back in the day. Okay, we confess, we're obsessed, but we got a podcast to help you remember that show. Hey there, TV lovers, and welcome to episode 33 of Remember That Show, the podcast where we revisit the obscure or forgotten TV shows of the 80s and 90s. I'm Adam Pope.
And I'm William Bruce West. We've got a real prime-time disaster to discuss with you today from one of 20th century's most beloved comedy stars. But before we dive into that madness, we've got to revisit our own TV-obsessed childhoods in a segment we call Theme Song.
So, Will, our show today was packed with comedic talent who went on to be part of some truly iconic programming. So, if you had to name the top 3 funniest TV shows from your lifetime, what would they be?
Oh man, this is going to be so controversial. But okay. So the thing that kind of like started my sense of humor, and my mom and I kind of bonded over this, it would be Get a Life. It's the short-lived Chris Elliott Fox sitcom, which was just like absurd, and like if you haven't seen it, you should see it. So that was like, oh, this is the kind of stuff I like. Get a Life, and then 30 Rock, because like 30 Rock to me is like the kind of show I would want to make. It's just that kind of like Tina Fey sensibility. And this one's the curveball, but I gotta say American Dad. I know not everybody is a Seth MacFarlane fan, but that show when it's on is on. And like it has made me laugh at things that just like I never would have thought before. So like those 3, Get a Life, 30 Rock, and American Dad. What about you?
Well, yeah, I mean, it is interesting when you have to like narrow it down, right? You're like, what has actually made me laugh consistently? What stands out to me? It's interesting. It makes sense for you. At least 2 of them very clearly are deconstructions of classic sitcoms, right? Like they look at the world of TV and they're just like, hey, but what if it was this? You know, like, so that makes a lot of sense. For me, just going like newest to oldest, Community. That's the show that was made for me. You know, like when you're saying 30 Rock for you, like Community, just everything about it, like the constant pop culture references, but mixed into the deconstruction of TV tropes, very self-referential humor within its own universe, constantly, you know, just like digging into, remember this episode? Remember this? Hey, we remember it. So there's that continuity there, like just so many Easter eggs, even just in the set design in the background. And then overall, just the amazing comedic performances of the cast. Like they really locked into characters on that show. And then like the editing would just like keep the energy up. So just everything about Community I loved. I had the entire series, you know, the each individual DVD set for the seasons. And then at one point early in our marriage, there was some disagreement about Community. Like, you know, as a young couple, I'm sure I was ignoring my wife and watching Community or something like that. And we had an issue and I had to get rid of them all as a good faith gesture, you know? And then all these years later, like it finally came back on Netflix and I was watching it the other day and she didn't care. Like it wasn't a sore spot anymore, but for years I was on like eggshells if I mentioned Community. She doesn't even remember what she was upset about. I don't remember. But then the other one, The Simpsons is like a cheap answer. Everybody loves The Simpsons. It's obviously now a warm blanket of comfort, but it is a show I have watched continuously on my own home recorded VHS tapes, then DVD, now streaming, for 30 years, the same 10 seasons, 12 seasons. I don't need to go beyond that. But there are jokes that I've heard 100 times that still make me laugh. Just remembering the delivery of certain lines will crack me up. Specifically, it's all the characters played by Hank Azaria and Harry Shearer. The show is about the family, and those actors are great in their characters, but I'm there for the supporting citizens of Springfield. That's who I want. That's what that show is about for me. And then the other one is also a sketch comedy series. Our show today is secretly number 4. It just didn't last long enough to really have an impact. But The State aired on MTV. The sheer variety of sketches and the madcap nature of that show, and the fact that there were so many members of that group that you were bound to find at least one who made you laugh with their style of comedy or their attitude. For me personally, they all work. They're all part of the stew, and I love everybody on that show. And if you look at their body of work after that series ended, 95% of that crew have been part of some truly amazing and influential comedic projects, whether they were in front of the camera or behind the camera and putting it together. So just like those are those shows that solidified my comedic identity for sure. I mean, and I'm sure we could pinpoint so many other things that have made us laugh over the years. But what we got to find out is, why was this show something that people were anticipating? What was it about the Dana Carvey Show? Why this man? So we got to figure out how it got the green light.
We've discussed the history of our shared appreciation for late night sketch comedy previously on our Mad TV episode, so go back, check that one out. But specifically, our subject this time around was harkening back to subversive and madcap primetime sketch comedy shows like Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In, and variety shows like the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour that ran on network TV in the 60s. These popular shows had a modern political edge that often resulted in meaningful controversy, but unfortunately gave way to truly vapid variety shows in the 70s, hosted by Sonny and Cher, Donnie and Marie, or Tony Orlando and Dawn, among other low-tier celebrities. If the general audience had seen you on TV, in a movie, or on the radio at some point, you could get a variety show greenlit in the 70s. Having gone out of favor by the 90s, it took a little bit more juice to revive the format for prime time. But luckily, the headlining star of the Dana Carvey Show had just that.
Yep, Dana Carvey began his career as a stand-up comedian doing impressions and used his popularity to begin an unsuccessful acting career in the early 80s. That is until he was cast on Saturday Night Live in 1986, where he became the breakout star until 1993. And at that time, it was the longest any cast member had remained on the show, earning 5 Primetime Emmy nominations during his tenure. And adding major fuel to his popularity was the 1992 hit movie Wayne's World, based on a Saturday Night Live sketch he appeared in with Mike Myers, and its sequel, Wayne's World 2. Now, Carvey tried many times to go solo on the silver screen before and after Wayne's World, failing repeatedly to make a hit. Despite bombing at the box office, Carvey remained a pop culture favorite, with catchphrases and impressions being repeated by office goofballs and class clowns all over the United States. He was a part of the pop culture. By 1995, Carvey was so popular, he was even said to be the frontrunner to take over for David Letterman's late night talk show on NBC when that disgruntled host jumped ship to CBS after not getting the Tonight Show hosting gig. However, another network lured Carvey to their side by offering complete comedic creative freedom, and the Dana Carvey Show was promoted as the hot new series coming to ABC in 1996. It was going to be airing after Home Improvement, which was the #1 show on television at that time. Obviously, there were high hopes for Carvey returning to the world of sketch comedy, but what he delivered was beyond anybody's expectations. So, Will, as a fan of Saturday Night Live, What was your opinion of Dana Carvey's comedic persona or his legacy from that show?
Ooh, well, I started watching SNL probably, let's say 87, because I've mentioned I never had a bedtime. So, like, I love that era. But Dana was not my favorite. I've always said I like the bad boys who've all, like, grown up to disappoint me, like Rob Schneider, like those guys, you know? Looking back from now, Dana goes in the Sherry O'Terry category, where, like, what happened? I don't get how you just screw over a sure thing like that. I look at Will Ferrell's career, and sure, times had changed by then, but I don't get why Dana never got that. I don't know if it was a political thing. I've read all the books, but I still don't know the stuff with him and Myers like entirely. But I know that like Dr. Evil was apparently stolen from Dana's impression of Lorne Michaels. So like I know that was like a wedge. And when you see what like Mike Myers was able to do, it makes no sense that Dana wasn't. Like this show that we're talking about today, it kind of showed me that like outside of the impressions and all that, Dana Carvey himself is not cool. Like, he's doing a cool thing. You know, it's kind of like David Blaine. David Blaine is just a weird guy until he does magic. And you're like, oh, at least the weird guy's redeeming because he can stay in that ice cube for a week or something like that. And the same here. It's like, Dana Carvey, he wouldn't be like the coolest guy in the class or like big man on campus, but he's gonna do his Bush or something or his Ross Perot. You're like, hey, the quiet guy's funny. So it's like, I don't know if he had the charisma to be a leading man, but knowing how he ultimately carried SNL during that era and to just see him go nowhere public. Because everybody, he did corporate gigs. So it's like, that's where the money is. That's that secret like financial pipeline most of us don't know about. But he doesn't have like a trilogy of anything. There's no Master of Disguise 2, or if there is, it's straight to video, and it's like his son, just like that Son of Mask, you know? So, like, what about you? What did you think of Dana Carvey?
Yeah, I mean, you're right on target with what his persona is nothing. There is no Dana Carvey attitude. There are his impressions, but even like zoomed in for me because Dana Carvey was just Garth. Like, that's where all my goodwill toward him came from because I watched Wayne's World on VHS endlessly. Wayne's World 2 less so, but that first one over and over and over again. I was just like, I love Garth. He's such a lovable character. But even that, Garth is an impression of his brother. He's just imitating his brother, and that is Garth. So none of it comes from Carvey himself. And I watched Saturday Night Live, like reruns. I had VHS tapes of like best ofs. So I knew his classic characters, but it would always just come back to no, he's the guy who thrust out his pelvis uncontrollably to Foxy Lady by Jimi Hendrix. And like these key scenes in Wayne's World for me. And so everybody was imitating Dana Carvey's imitations, but he never had anything to say like, oh, this is an original character. Like he had great collaborators that came over with him to this Dana Carvey show from Saturday Night Live. But like the biggest character I could think of was Massive Head Wound Harry from Saturday Night Live. And it's, you're shaking your head.
No, I think his biggest character is the church lady.
What I'm saying is, yeah, I guess for original character, you're right. Church lady is the breakout. But for me personally, I never cared about the church lady. I wanted Massive Head Wound Harry to return, which is a one-off sketch where he's just a guy at a party and he's got this grotesque wig with his head split open and it's just got oozing blood on it.
And the dog starts licking his brain.
Yeah, exactly. Like he's nonchalant about everything and people are like, oh, what happened to your head? And yeah, there's a dog where he's like, I'm getting kind of dizzy. I better lay down. And the dog licks the headpiece, but then it starts biting it and then it starts pulling the wig off. And like, that's like live TV, like to me, that was his shining moment on Saturday Night Live. Like that's what it was all about. So, but just you keep looking at his legacy, and he has a podcast now, but I stopped listening to that podcast because he's not interesting. He's a real meek, sweet guy, but he has no attitude. He has no edge, which is good that he has David Spade on that show with him, who definitely has a persona, whether you like it or not.
Which is weird because, like, I guess it is a good balance, but I don't think of them on the same level. Even though Dana didn't fulfill his destiny in my eyes, I don't think Spade is on his level. It would be almost like if you had a podcast right now that was like Molly Shannon and like Melissa Villasenor, and like Chad's probably the only listener who's going to get that because he's still watching the show. I could never listen to Fly on the Wall because I get they're kind of bringing different perspectives to it, but I don't think they're evenly yoked. Like, I don't know. And you were saying it's funny, the juxtaposition, because to me, he's the church lady. I don't like Wayne's World. I've never seen the movies in their entirety, so that's on me. I'm the outlier of our cohort. But those were like some of my least favorite sketches of that era. I was like, why do people find this funny? So when they made a movie of it, like, to me, The Ladies' Man justified a movie 12 times more than Wayne's World ever did.
And Tim Meadows thanks you. At least somebody appreciates that character.
I would go on to anger him on Twitter, but at the time,
as you do to all your heroes.
Oh yeah, that's how you let them know you love them.
But yeah, no, I totally understand. And yeah, Dana Carvey, like you say, is that enigma. He should have been huge. He was for his moment, in his place, but outside of Saturday Night Live, he could never make it work. Never more so than in prime time in 1996. So it's time that we find out what this was all about in our elevator pitch.
The Dana Carvey Show was a sketch comedy variety show that premiered on the ABC network on March 12, 1996, running for just 7 controversial episodes before being canceled on April 30th, lasting just over 1 month on the air and leaving 1 episode unaired. The series was co-created by Robert Smigel, who had also come from Saturday Night Live, while future superstar stand-up comedian turned blacklisted pariah Louis C.K. was head writer. The cast included future host of his own comedy TV show, Stephen Colbert, and big screen crossover star Steve Carell. Other regulars included lone female performer Heather Morgan and resident fat guy Bill Chott. Several SNL castmates of Carvey also showed up for cameos, including Jan Hooks and the late Phil Hartman, as well as other random celebrities like Ellen DeGeneres, Regis Philbin, Isaac Hayes, Paul Schaefer, Abe Vigoda, and Tony Randall. Adam, were you watching the Dana Carvey Show when it aired?
Well, I wouldn't have missed it for anything, and I didn't. I was watching each episode live as it aired, and not only was I watching it, I was recording it, though not on VHS. It was on audio cassette because our VCR record function had broken, probably from overuse by me. So I just put my tape player next to the speaker so I could listen to the show at least over and over again. I knew it was something special. I must have had some premonition that it wasn't going to last. And it's funny, on those tapes, you can hear me laughing uncontrollably in the background and just at the explosion of unexpected comedy that was coming at me. I could not. I'm 14 at this time. Like, I guess I was 13. I was just about to turn 14. I was just like, wow, this is insanity, and I love it. I was very disappointed when it was canceled, to the point that for years all I had was the audio cassettes to remember it by. And then I eventually found some bootleg DVDs online, and then they released the official The Dana Carvey Show DVD set. Shout Factory put that out, and I'm pretty sure I was the first to order it and maybe one of like 20 people who did and even remembered the show. So this was a big television touchstone for me. This show is like, for the premise of remember that show? Like, this is one of those things that I have brought up for decades and nobody saw it and nobody remembers it. And I was just like, but it happened and it was great. Or was it? So, Will, did you know about the Dana Carvey show? Did you try to watch it?
I knew about it. I didn't watch it. This aired at the same time as the John Larroquette show was on NBC, and as a Night Court fan, I had to follow my man John. So I just didn't care about this. Like, it didn't look interesting to me. And also, we'll probably talk about this later, but like, something that was really off-putting to me, which probably no one would care about now, but it was the whole, like, Yum Brands naming thing. The whole, like, the Taco Bell Dana Carvey show, the Mug Root Beer Dana Carvey. It's like, what is this? Why is it changing every episode? Only to find out that, like, after the first episode, Pepsi pulled the ads for Pizza Hut and Taco Bell. So it was like after that they could make fun of the sodas, which they do. There's one sketch where they act like Mountain Dew looks like pee. That's weird. You're not a NASCAR. I'm just like, what's this corporate sponsorship thing? So no, I didn't watch it.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, yeah, this is going to be interesting. A fresh perspective from Will then on the Dana Carvey show. But just to give you an idea of how the show came together, what it was involving. The Dana Carvey show consisted of, pulled from the headline sketch comedy, including parodies of political figures like then President Bill Clinton and his political rival for re-election, Bob Dole, but also mockery of Prince Charles and Princess Diana's recent divorce, the O.J. Simpson trial, movie parodies, and of course, plenty of kind of obscure celebrity impressions by Dana Carvey. The series also had a lot of bonkers original sketch ideas like waiters who are nauseated by food, the stupid pranksters, Grandma the Clown, and the animated short, The Ambiguously Gay Duo. The other joke in the format was this idea of the sponsors, and most people, like Will, probably didn't get it. Why is it Taco Bell? Why is it Mug Root Beer? Why is it Mountain Dew and all of that? It was supposed to be a mockery of that idea of old television being promoted by like a cigarette company. But it just seemed like, corporate sponsorship to the max. Now, the difference between this sketch comedy show and others was that the comedy pushed the envelope more than anything else airing in prime time, and even some late night stuff. You were not seeing this style of humor. The most notorious sketch and what most people knew about the show were the first moments of the first episode, where Dana Carvey as Bill Clinton pulled open his shirt to reveal multiple lactating nipples, which he used to nurse a baby and various animals. And this led to the widespread outrage, caused the sponsors to release public apologies, as Will said. They'd pull their sponsorship. People were writing angry letters about the show's content. But with all the controversy, the question is, was it funny? That's what we're here to discuss as we get into our Cheers. So, Will, first time out, what stood out to you from this show that you were like, oh, they're doing something here? Uh-oh. Quiet on the cheers front from Will.
Well, this is so hard because like I didn't realize you loved it so much.
You
So
can
now I
break my heart.
But I'm just kind of like, I understood what they were doing here. At the end of the day, the show is not the problem. The problem was like the environment. It's gonna be the time slot, the network, things like that. But the show itself, they were really carrying the baton from what Conan started, but in prime time. And I love early Conan because he got away with things because no one cared. He's at this terrible time slot and he's replaced this guy that everyone loved who took his ball and went home. And like it was experimental. And so like watching it now, I get it. I don't think I would have gotten it at the time. There was this sketch, the award show where it's like Gregory Peck, and basically, I hate when people say you couldn't do it today. You could do it today, but it's gonna cause a bunch of think pieces where like every nominee was just this gross racial caricature, but like at the end, you see a lot of guys like because it's a cast of like 6 people. And it's just kind of like corny white guys in tuxes dancing. And it's like, to them, they're dancing, but you watch it and you're like, oh, what are they doing? But like, it's an era that you can't really even capture anymore. I went to college with these guys, like this kind of humor. Like, this is very like sketch comedy improv group humor. It was like a warm blanket in a way, but I also would have cringed at it then, and I kind of cringe at it now, but it was familiar to me.
This is as close as you can get to a cheer. I recognize this style of humor. And I don't
Well, I mean, like, what they're going for is subversive. And subversive is hard to do. You know what I mean? It's like being actually authentically edgy is hard to do because when you force it, you come off like an edgelord. So it's that whole deal of like, I get they felt what they were doing at that time was subversive, but baby, that ain't subversive. It's a moment in time, and that's why I really need to hear what this show meant to you because Dana starts out like his monologue in the premiere is like, you haven't seen this on TV in like 30 years because he thinks he's bringing back Laugh-In. And I can watch Laugh-In now and be like, hey, that was a funny show. But I don't think he really took it to the Laugh-In point. It wasn't trying to be smart about politics. It wanted to be weird about politics. And some people just don't like weird. I've even said before, I don't like weird for the sake of weird. So it's like, I get what they were going for. I don't know if they pulled off the execution. And now I want you to bestow upon me all the greatness that I'm missing about this show.
So here's the thing, like your point about that it is very reminiscent of early Conan O'Brien, that is because Robert Smigel was also co-creating, the late night show for Conan O'Brien. So it's definitely going to have that. The difference being here is they had a network executive at ABC who completely believed in them. And he just said, go for it, guys. Whatever you want to do, we got to shock people because ABC is too safe right now. And we want to just like get attention. We want to show people that we could be cool and also, that we can appeal to what everybody loves, which is the wholesome Dana Carvey comedy, which I don't even know if he was ever really wholesome. He always, in his impersonations, would straddle the line, but he was so lovable. And again, I think a lot of that was Garth Goodwill. Oh, he's like this little shy guy. We love Garth. Anyway,
he impersonated a lot of conservative people, though. So it never gave him the runway to be offensive.
Yeah, exactly. So he was never going too far then. And here he was going too far because they were doing everything they always wanted and in a way that was so outrageous. And like, I'm not a shock value comedy guy. I never liked South Park. I never liked, the shows because I always feel like it happens and then you can't go back to it. This stuff was so insane that I was seeing that it affected me at a point in my development where I was just like, you could do this? Like, you can say these things or you can show these things? Like, just to give an example, like they have, on the political side, like they're going around interviewing all the potential Republican candidates, right? And like at one point, there's a guy who was a notable racist and he's talking about like Mexicans and all these terrible things he's going to do. And he's eating a heart and he's saying it's a spicy Mexican heart. And he takes a bite out of it. And that's not funny. That's just what? Like that, like
that's hilarious.
I mean, it's just like you can't do that. Like that's the political, like we're gonna mock, a racist. We're gonna do all those things like that. That has some levels to it. But what I was plugging into in those sketches was instead Robert Smigel playing Bob Dole. And Bob Dole just being this out of touch, like totally old, doddering man. Bob Dole knows the flavor of soup. He would just like say random non sequiturs. And that was like catching me off guard. I loved it. But then they would go to something that was 100% 13-year-old boy humor, which was the stupid pranksters running sketch. Like that's the thing that went from the beginning to the end, which is just Dana Carvey and Steve Carell as two just average looking guys, and they would pay for some service. So they'd go through a fast food drive-through window and they'd order their food, they'd pay their money, and the guy would say, okay, I'll be back with your food. And then they'd look at each other and giggle and then peel out and take off in their car and be like, we screwed him, we screwed him. And they were so proud of themselves, they'd be laughing, you know. It would just keep escalating, you know, to the point like, you know, they'd shovel an old lady's walkway and take off without getting paid. But then they like get a prostitute and they pay her $300 and then they take off. Like just it would go until in the very last episode, they finally did a thing where like they won the sweepstakes. They had all this money. They got their giant check and they chuck it. And then they eventually finally have a moment of realization for all that they have given away and wasted. And it's just like, you didn't expect it to ever have that ending in the way that sketch comedy goes, you know? So it's just like things along those lines would catch me in such a big way. Part of the thing too is he did bring over like Ross Perot. I'm going to do Ross Perot now in what is one of the funniest sketches ever, in my opinion, like Saturday Night Live, any show, which is Phil Hartman is playing Larry King. And he's
waste of Phil Hartman, but it's great for Dana.
he needs that support system, right? He needs to have like a real fantastic co-star in a sketch. And Phil Hartman is that 100% because Phil Hartman as Larry King tried to say like, you've got a new political party and are you going to be running again like you did in 92? And Ross Perot just keeps telling him, like, I'm not running for president. Why do you say I'm running for president? And then Larry King will be like, well, what about this? You paid the cast of Ellen $1 million to say your name on last week's episode. He's like, what? They go to a clip, and it's just Ellen DeGeneres and Jeremy Piven and all. And they're just like, hey, I'm going to go catch the latest Ross Perot movie. Well, I'd go, but I'm making some Ross Perot pie. And he's like, well, what does that mean, Larry? He's like, well, they're saying Ross Perot. They're also saying hello. Is hello running for president? He just keeps like trying to break Larry King, you know, and he's just like, well, you're here to announce your party. See, that's the thing, Larry. I'm not here. And he's like, what? Then we have a caller. Hey, Larry, it's me. It's Ross Perot. See, I told you I'm not here. It goes to like the nth degree and it builds and builds and builds until Larry King is losing his mind. So like there were some very well crafted sketches. Again, like I say, like top of the form, but it was mixed in with stuff that just was totally out there, like Grandma the Clown.
Oh,
describe
I have
Grandma
that on
the
my
Clown.
list.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Like is that even like a joke? You know, like Grandma the Clown is just this old lady dressed as a really sad clown, and she's surrounded by like little children, and like what does she give the little girl? It's a balloon animal, but like she doesn't make it into any kind of animal. It's just like a tube balloon, and she hands it to her, and then she's like, scratch Grandma's ankle, and then the little girl scratches the ankle, and it's very like disturbing.
Yeah, it's awkward humor to the nth degree, where it's something that would be on Wonder Chosen, if anybody remembers that show, where it's just like kids in it, like either saying things that are inappropriate or in a situation that's inappropriate for the children that is damaging them psychologically. They're like, why are we here? You told us this was a fun thing? That's bizarre. But like to your point about the Mountain Dew episode, where it's literally just them mocking their sponsor. I think that one is hilarious when you're saying subversive. Like, wait a minute, you're going after your sponsor. You're saying their drink looks like pee, except that the twist is it's Dana Carvey asking Bill Chott. He's just like, what does that look like? You know, he's like, cool, refreshing springtime in a glass? No. What does that look like? Liquid sunshine? There you go. Mountain Dew. It looks exactly like liquid sunshine. You know, like, ultimately they don't say it looks like pee. They say it looks like liquid sunshine. Like there's subversive back and forth. And so like that kind of stuff really would catch me in a big way. I'm just like, that's so good.
But see, you live on the good side of the internet. I've traveled to the bad side of the internet, and that's just troll 101. To me, that's like, well, we already cashed your check. That's not subversive. subversive to me. But things I liked. I loved the questions from the audience. They helped kind of like set the table for what you were about to watch because they were just so off the wall. There's the one kid where he's like, do you think JFK shot JFK on the grassy knoll because he fell through like a time portal? You know, just stuff like that. And you're like, huh? But that's the show they were putting on. And I'm glad you mentioned Wonder Shows, and because this is early Adult Swim before it like just turned into stoner tunes. I recognize this humor. I didn't have it then, you know? And so when you say like, oh, that executive wanted to shake things up, I'm like, why? Home Improvement's the #1 show on TV. Why would you shoot yourself in the foot with that? But like, I appreciate it now. Like watching this, you've got your Steve Carell, you've got your Stephen Colbert, the Steves, you know? And like, they go on to do their like Daily Show stuff, and then they would inspire other young comedy upstarts. Like in college, I did a cappella, but I really wanted to be funny. And it was never necessarily like a performance thing. I've always wanted to know that professional funny people thought I was funny. I wanted that validation. It was like junior year, I tried out for the improv group. I wanted that taste of like, am I just funny to myself? So like, I was surrounded by like all these people who were inspired by this show and the people who came from this show. And then when they would graduate, they would write for The Daily Show or for John Oliver. So it's like, I get it now. I wouldn't have gotten it then. We'll get to it when we get to Jeers. The problems aren't necessarily the show. Like, there are problems there, but I'm just saying 13-year-old Will wouldn't have gotten this. Now I completely understand what they're doing, but I just don't know if the execution was there. That's all.
Yeah. And that's for me, I feel like it was my awakening because once I got into high school, I was just writing sketch comedy for everything. For school assignments, I would record a video instead and turn it in like, does this qualify? And the teachers would play it for the class. Like for every event that was happening, I'm like, hey, can I do a sketch here? This kind of showed me you could have so much fun. And that's what I was seeing is they were enjoying every minute of making this show, even if the audience couldn't have like a cerebral acceptance of what they were being given. Like the guys making the show were having a great time, and like they knew they were being naughty, but they knew they were getting away with something, but they were also, it was pure joy for them. And even in interviews now, they'll be like, there's a documentary on Hulu about the failure of this show called Too Funny to Fail, because they said, this is so funny. This is like what we want to be doing. But the #1 sketch for me, I think outside of, Bob Dole, Robert Smigel as Bob Dole was like the breakout character for me always. But there is a sketch where Dana Carvey is playing Prince Charles, and he is talking about his anger at Princess Di and all the public, divorce nonsense and cheating on him and all these things. So he wants to reinstate the monarchical right to have your spouse beheaded. And so he's like, I'll say it to you in a song. And he sings this Herman's Hermits 60s style song about that he wants to chop off Princess Diana's head because it's in like that poppy style. But he's like, I know what's right, I know what's fair, her body here, her head over there. He sings this whole thing, and then he has this dream sequence when he comes back. It's just like The Who. If anybody knows that The Who was a band that was famous for trashing their stage at the end of their set. And so they're just like destroying the set. And then there's a Princess Di body on a chopping block. He cuts off the head, and now there's this bloody stump body that's like dancing around. That was to me the essence of the energy of this show. They're like, you would never see this anywhere. Maybe Roseanne. I think Roseanne had a Halloween episode where there was a beheaded character and the body is holding the head in one of the costumes. But like, it was just so outrageous that I think that the energy of the fun they were having could translate to some people and then could turn off the rest of them. And I just happen to be one of the twisted people who could grab it, accept it, and love it. I've had to hold back on actually trying to impersonate the Dana Carvey Show to just regurgitate everything I've listened to and memorized for all these years. But it is one of those shows that I just think, because it was so random, but had the talent behind it, that if you go back and revisit it now, you can recognize how brilliant some of it was and how maybe over the top some of it was that didn't need to be.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, the Princess Di stuff, man. They were hard on her. And then when you look at the timeline, in a year, she's going to be running through that tunnel. You know, like, it's not like it's a long time afterwards. So this is just like one example of like what she was going through that led to that. So I tried not to like let that like taint things for me. But like, I'm glad you mentioned, like, it is very, very clear that they are enjoying every minute of it. And they're like, can you believe we're getting a chance to do this, and let's just do it till we can't do it anymore? And that kind of, to me, comes from the Conan spirit of like, Conan did not do well those first few years, you know? There was a point where they were renewing his contract like every 6 weeks, but Conan never tried to change for his audience. He knew he had an audience out there and hoped that they would find him. And that's always how I have felt in like creative endeavors. Like, I've tried to be like, what do people want to read? What do people, but ultimately this is how I think. This is like how my brain works. And if you understand it, you do. If you don't, oh well. And I got it from that kind of stuff, you know, like from Conan, from Get a Life. That's why, like, I appreciate what it is. I definitely do. It's more of the landscape that wasn't in its favor.
Yeah, and we'll get into that. The last thing I'll just say, you brought up the Steves. Steve Carell, and Stephen Colbert are hilarious on this show, especially Steve Carell. Like, you see everything that he was going to bring to the world. He has so many opportunities to do that on this show. And like, even at the time, I was just like, this guy is like crazy. He's got like the wildest eyes, and like they just let him be a maniac as often as possible. But then like he'll also be like the insincere host of an Entertainment Tonight style show. He could play so many levels. And so it was a wonderful springboard for him and Stephen Colbert to at least show what they had to offer, to then be brought on to The Daily Show and things like that. And even, Stephen Colbert specifically has said, like, I had no prospects. Like, Steve Carell was funnier than me. I was his understudy. Like, they were doing sketch comedy, in one of the biggest things in Chicago, and they were cutting their teeth, but they probably would never have gotten on a TV show. They didn't get on Saturday Night Live, all those types of things. So this, even for the bright, shining moment, and the tarnished legacy and what it did to Dana Carvey, it was great for Stephen Colbert and Steve Carell, and it gave them at least a national platform for the briefest moment, and then we see where it took them.
Colbert, I think they said that like his audition tape was basically him using his daughter as a puppet.
Yeah.
Like that was just where they were. And just kind of like, I would like to hang out with these guys. Like, I know these guys, so that's what I liked from the show. They were saying that like when they got canceled, they deliberately staged the writer's room to look like they had torn it up, like after a Who show. And it was when security got mad at them that they were like, oh, no, like, we didn't really mess up the place. Like, we were, it's like, even in cancellation, we're just gonna have fun. It's all jokes.
Yeah, so I mean, definitely, like, they were never even bitter about the fact that the show was getting canceled. They knew that it couldn't last by that point. They're just like, oh yeah, what were we thinking? Like, how did we think that they would agree to this? Especially, we should say that Disney bought ABC just before they went on the air. So the concern over public approval definitely was amplified from when they were originally brought on board to the ABC family. But we got to talk about that public approval. We got to talk about how that, affected the show negatively, and even our perception as to why it didn't work in our jeers.
Boo! Boo! Boo!
Hey, outrageous sketch comedy in primetime. Great idea, right?
Basically, it was the wrong network, the wrong time period, and the wrong era. Like, that's really what it boils down to. But there's so much rolled up in this. They didn't learn the lesson from Conan. Like I was saying, like it's Conan in prime time. Conan barely works at late night. Like, it doesn't work in prime time. And this is the point where he's just pulling the plane up. So for them to go from Conan to ABC and be like, hey, we're going to do the same stuff, but after Home Improvement was insane. The country wasn't ready for that. Like, there weren't enough of us watching TV, and especially Home Improvement's not gonna be the lead-in for that. Like, it just isn't. That's the insanity to me, in that, like, wrong place, wrong time, but also there was a lot going on with like primetime sketch comedy in the 90s, and like a lot of it was urban. You know, it's like you had In Living Color, you had House of Buggin', you had all these outrageous shows, which I think kind of got away with a lot of stuff because they were kind of punching everyone. It's these like minority heavy shows, but if you equally mock everyone, you can get away with it. But from a sketch comedy perspective, you know how like there are those people who say like, how come there's no White History Month? That's what the Dana Carvey Show was to sketch comedy. And like for it to be edgy, like for what it wanted to do, there's no one in the cast who's believably edgy. Because like you were saying, Dana is either a conservative guy based on how the characters he's played, or he's nothing. But he's not like if you gave Dennis Miller a show. Like there's no bad boy. So a lot of like what they do in order to be like edgy and subversive comes off kind of uneven or even mean. It's like the Gregory Peck sketch that I'm talking about. That's just a bunch of white guys making fun of like every minority in the book. Or the OJ sketch, where there's an Entertainment Tonight sketch where they're saying, due to the popularity of the OJ trial, Johnny Cochran's tactics are catching on in courtrooms across America. And you've got Dana as just some random like defense attorney doing a black impression that's only slightly less offensive than the one Robin Williams used to do. You know, it's like, what's the haps, Jack? You know, like that guy. You know, so it's a very uneven show. When you compare it to the other options out there, and even though it's doing something different, it didn't stand a chance.
Well, I mean, to your point, at the moment in time, it was okay to do racial stereotype joke, you know, just have an accent, and that was enough. That was a joke. In 2025, absolutely not. You know, like we look back now, we're horrified, but at that time, that was like Dana Carvey's entire thing, celebrity impressions and accents. To this day, he still does all his accents unapologetically.
He did the Asian guy on SNL like last fall, because I live tweet SNL. It's like the only show people watch in real time now. And people are like, did he really just do that? And there was nothing. Like,
well, that's the thing, is he has so much goodwill. Like everybody still loves Dana Carvey, and still like he's not, they know he's not doing it out of some sort of, you know, like racist, like secret thing in the back of his head. He's just like, this is a funny thing that was funny to me, you know, 30, 40 years ago, and everybody was laughing. So they still laugh at me now, right? Then there's certain things you just have to get rid of. Like on his podcast, he'll do impersonations of his doctor who is Indian. And he talks about like, but my doctor loves the impression. He asks me to do it every time I come in the office. So he's trying to say, I know one person from this race that says it's okay for me to do this thing. And then it runs with that. And so that is the big thing in retrospect. Now, what I will say is at the time, with all his impersonations and things like that, I think it's the expectation of who Dana Carvey is and what he was going to deliver that is the biggest fault of this show, is that people wanted, like, they weren't expecting the extreme humor that like all of his cohorts were encouraging. And you can kind of see in interviews that he doesn't throw everybody under the bus necessarily, but he's also kind of saying like, you know, my manager and Robert Smigel and all these people were really encouraging me that we should go this direction because we could do whatever we want. You know, like there's a sketch with like Oliver Stone making a new movie about the founding fathers where he's cutting up cocaine and snorting it. And you're just like, in prime time, where it's just like, this was is never gonna fly. It's not what people wanted from you. And like, yeah, you mixed in like the first episode has a church lady top 10, or like they would do these things like interstitials in between sketches where like it would just open up, it'd be Dana Carvey with no makeup on or anything, and he'd do like Hans and Franz voice for 1 second, and then it would go to the next sketch. So it's just like, we're giving you a taste, but we're never delivering what you really want. Okay, you get one Ross Perot. Okay, are you happy? Now we're going to go over here and we're going to do, skinheads from Maine. It's middle America, who is secretly the biggest audience, right? Like that is prime time. That's who you're trying to reach. That's why Home Improvement is the biggest show on television. It's not the coastal elites, it's not California, it's not New York. You're trying to reach these people. There's a Regis and Kathy Lee sketch where they make fun of Kathy Lee's Christian beliefs. She sings a whole song about not believing in evolution. She's singing to a monkey, I didn't evolve from you, I evolved from Jesus, which in premise to guys who obviously aren't going to church every day in a writer's room, that's hilarious. And the unexpected nature of it can get a chuckle out of you, but most of the audience that was tuning in probably did go to church every Sunday, and they're saying, you're mocking my beliefs on your show. And like,
Regis and Kathy Lee was huge at this point. We forget about that because like Kelly and Mark is just like a shadow of what it was back in the day. But like, what was I listening? Oh, there's a podcast I listened to. I told you about it, but ultimately they just do a random TV show, and they watched an episode of Regis and Kathy Lee from like the early 90s, and they went through the timeline of like from like it went national in like 89, and from like 90 to 97, 98, that was daytime. And then once Regis like gets millionaire and he's just going back and forth, like he tied the country together.
And I think the problem is, I talked about the shock value of South Park earlier. South Park gets away with a lot because their premise, we make fun of everybody, conservatives, liberals, anybody. We are going to take aim at them for believing in whatever they believe in. This show really did just take aims at conservative people and people on the extreme side of conservatism. So like, you don't really see much, in terms of like, I mean, Bill Clinton, you could say they're making fun of Bill Clinton.
I was going to say Bill Clinton, like they took aim at the status quo.
Right.
Like now in today's speak, we would say like, oh, the left wing, the right wing, but like the status quo. It's funny, like I forgot about how much people made fun of Bill jogging because he was the fat guy, like when we did Women of the House, he invited her to jog with him, that was the thing. And now he's been vegan for like 15 years and you forget that was who was in the White House, But like you were saying, at no point do I ever believe this is Dana Carvey Show.
Right.
He comes out, he does the monologue, is his face on everything. If anything, it's an ensemble show. To me, it's a Robert Smigel show, and he just doesn't like the attention, and Dana's the name. It's a Robert Smigel show through and through. And again, he didn't learn anything from his time at Conan because the ambiguously gay duo, first of all, I didn't know it debuted here. I love Saturday TV Funhouse. I own the DVD collection of his cartoons from SNL. Did not know that appeared here. But you gotta remember, this is 2 years before Will and Grace. Like, this might sound crazy to people, especially a lot of our listeners, but jokes about gay people were fair game until Will and Grace. 1998, where you're like, oh, wait, he has a job and wears a suit and you wouldn't know he's gay unless he told you? Like, that kind of deal. It changed how America saw how other people were living, and it changed kind of like comedy in a sense. But Smigel thought he could get away with this in 96 when like we weren't really ready to have a conversation, good or bad. At that point in TV, the gay character is maybe the wacky neighbor, like Monroe from Too Close for Comfort. He never really goes on a date, and if he does, you don't believe it anyway. But you weren't just gonna just have in your face gay humor after Home Improvement. It's simply not done.
Yeah, I mean, like, again, like the swings they took, you could sort of applaud them for it, and then you're like, no, this is a complete miscalculation and in poor taste. And so you just look at it, you're just like, why did you think anybody but the people in a comedy club or in your writer's room would get the joke? Because the average TV viewer is very literal. Whatever you put at them, they're saying, oh, you believe that? Like the skinheads from Maine, where they're saying racist things with a Maine accent, and that's supposed to be the joke. Like normally they'd just be talking about the weather, which they do. They make a comment about the weather, then they make a comment about some other race that's not white people, you know, and they're just like, why did you think that people would get that joke? They're not going to get that joke. You know, like the only thing that is a universal sketch, I feel like, in like the whole history of the show is waiters who are nauseated by food. It is the safest sketch, but it's like slightly edgy. Like these people are going to pretend to throw up on TV, but it's so funny and it's like relatable and everybody can get the joke because everybody has, you know, almost thrown up or thrown up at some point in their lives, you know? So it's just like, and the only other thing I'll say is, yeah, Dana Carvey did do his impersonations. He does Rich Little's All Rich Little One Man Easter, which is him saying, I'm not the guy who did the impersonations. It was Rich Little. He was the previous generation's guy, and that's all he was known for, was imitating the people of the day. So now I'm imitating his impersonations. Do you guys know who Rich Little is? You don't. Are you going to know who I am? Oh, you might not, you know, like, and even the fallout from the Dana Carvey show, aside from the fact that all the sponsors pulled out and the last episode, they had to get a random local New York Chinese food restaurant to sponsor them. Then Dana Carvey goes on basically like his reclamation of his image tour, because this was the beginning of 96. By the end of 96, Lorne Michaels says, oh yeah, you can host Saturday Night Live. So he comes on Saturday Night Live. Then he's going on all the talk shows just like as a goodwill ambassador for, you still love me, right? I'm still a good guy, you know? And so like, it's weird, like where you see like it bombed so hard that he's just trying to save face as much as he can. He even takes over sketches from the Dana Carvey show, like stuff that either didn't air or maybe just wasn't recognized, and then does them on that Saturday Night Live episode. It's even on like the best of Dana Carvey compilation. Is one of like this whole thing about the death of Gerald Ford. The anchor is doing his jokes about all the possible ways he could die, you know, like that. There's a Dana Carvey show version and there's the Saturday Night Live version, and they're identical except for the makeup and the costume, you know. So
one problem with Dana in general is that he works really well in an election year, and luckily for them, 96. But like if that show had gotten a second season, what else has he got? You know, it's like he couldn't bring in Garth. The ownership of characters is always a big deal in this. So it's like we saw he got the church lady. How much can you do with that? And then how much can you do before you get sick of her? So you were saying, who is this funny to? One thing I found, because I really like threw myself into like the comedy bubble of like comedy people live in a bubble. And what are the two biggest cities for comedy? You got New York and you got LA, but then who is this show for? So it's just like they're cut off from the people they're supposed to be reaching. And that's why something like a Jeff Foxworthy or Larry the Cable Guy, they're pandering, but they know what their audience wants. I go back to our like unofficial tagline of we're too smart for TV. Whenever somebody says a show is smart these days, that means it's low rated. So it's like Arrested Development, 30 Rock. 30 Rock was like a bubble show most of its life, you know, like it was not a huge ratings hit. But then people love to like crap on the Big Bang Theory. It's universal.
yeah.
You know, I could write a thesis on the Big Bang Theory because I get into fights where it's like, you just don't understand. And people will go online and say like the most offensive stuff like, oh, it's blackface for nerds. I'm like, do you hear yourself? Do you know what you're saying? This show lasted 12 years. Doesn't mean it's good, but it means it hit all the right notes it needed to hit. 279 episodes. In case you're wondering, I was doing some research on Big Bang Theory. But I'm just saying, it's like they didn't have the right consultants or whatever. They were doing this for them and it shows.
Yeah, 100%. And ultimately, I came in saying, I love this show. It meant a lot to me. But somebody like Will, and any of you listening out there who never watched the Dana Carvey Show, going back now, you can pick and choose a few sketches, again, that like Germans who say nice things, just these things that are scatological and random, the stupid pranksters you probably could enjoy on some level. But like, there's barely anything in this show that can be salvaged because it was A, of the time, and B, very offensive and went too far. And I just feel like I have a soft spot in my heart for the madness, but I do not expect anybody else to accept it. And I recognize why it did not catch on. And I can see that now, but it is one of those things that is just a beautiful disaster to me in every way.
You don't have to do that because, like, this is a very dangerous limb to go out on. And I don't know if we're equipped to start this conversation. But this is one of those shows, though, where you really have to look at it through the lens of, am I personally offended by this? Or do I currently reside in a society that has informed me I should be offended by this? Where it's like, I laugh at a lot of stuff that's not great, but it's like, I think I'm a good person. I'm not a great person, but it's like, sometimes comedy just touches you. You know what I mean? And it's like, a lot of people, and it's great in a way and not, but a lot of people get offended on behalf of other people, you know, and then that spreads. It's like you were saying, Dana and his doctor. Now, his doctor isn't equipped to speak for all of India, but he's saying the one guy I know is like, please do this for me. And really, in that dynamic, Dana's just like a performer monkey for this guy, you know? So it's like, in the power dynamic, the doctor still holds the cards. So I'm just saying, like, I think it's worth checking out. It's not on us to apologize for it. It's not on you to apologize for 13-year-old Adam.
Well, thank you, Will. I appreciate that. And like I say, if you're somebody who watched it and you laughed along with me and you can still appreciate some of it, that's awesome. But Will, was there any way for them to save the Dana Carvey Show? This patient was taken to the morgue, so we got to talk about this. How could we save it as the show doctors? All right, Will, this is your superpower. Where did the Dana Carvey Show belong? What network?
Comedy Central or MTV. Now, he might have been a tad too old for MTV at this point because, like, they would have thanked him for his service, but he was still an old man for that demographic. This is like when MTV was MTV.
Yeah.
But keeping him in the Viacom family, I put it on Comedy Central, and he would have gotten just as many episodes. They even said that, like, he would have gotten a bigger episode order had he gone to CBS, but that show wouldn't have lasted there either. This is not a network show. Like, plain and simple. And had it gotten another season, they were constantly smarting under the, like, network notes, and now they've got Disney as their dad, and things would have only gotten worse. So they needed to go to basic cable. That's where they need to go to spread their wings, because otherwise, what they're trying to do doesn't work with network notes. Like, to go back to the Conan comparison, and again, Smigel should have understood this. Later on, the huge catastrophe that was Conan getting the Tonight Show meant that Conan now had to bring his brand of humor to an earlier time slot, to where more of Middle America was watching. And surprise, Middle America didn't understand Conan. And he tried to, like, round his edges, but then he wasn't Conan anymore, you know? So it's like the same thing here with the crew working on this show. Not even Dana. Honestly, this might be one of those situations where, like, Dana goes back to, like, corporate gigs. You could bring anybody in there. Like, bring in Will Sasso. Hell, let's go in the timeline, pluck him from Mad TV, put him in this. Just someone who's good with voices. Because as we've said, Dana's good with politicians. Once we were done with Clinton Dole, we didn't need need that anymore. So what do you do in 97? You got to bring in another woman because you're going to want to do a Spice Girls parody. And like that one woman was just doing all the heavy lifting. So it's like, you're going to turn this into a more ensemble Mad TV like show. Maybe Dana still has a producer credit. Maybe he comes out and says the good nights, but he's not the linchpin anymore because he really wasn't doing it. You know, it was all these like shining stars that we know now who were just kind of getting the spotlight. So it would have been more of like a development league for SNL or for like Mad TV, you know? I look at things right now and I'm kind of like, whenever someone leaves SNL and they get their own vehicle, it's almost like WWE. Vince McMahon had this thing where like he got a piece of wherever you went. So it was only like recently that like The Rock got his name back. Like when they sold the WWE, The Rock got his name back. Anything that had Dwayne Johnson, The Rock in it, Vince McMahon got a piece because he owned the name. And I've also noticed if you leave SNL, your thing is produced by Lorne. So it was kind of interesting to me that Lorne's not near this.
No.
So I'm like, did Lorne not have faith in this? Lorne will put his name on anything. One of my favorite sketch shows only has 6 episodes. It's called The Vacant Lot in Canada. Lorne produced that, and they're just like the background extras of the kids in the hall. But Lorne isn't near this, so that should have told you right then and there. But like, if they could have set up some like feeder relationship, you know, it's like, we do the scouting, we kind of dust them off, we get them into shape, and then you have your new not ready for primetime players. But again, I'm putting it on cable. It's not edgy enough for HBO, and I don't want to spike it up to justify HBO. I think it could be just fine on Comedy Central, and we just turn it into more of an ensemble. And that's like at the time. This isn't like, oh, it needs to be really retooled or how I'd bring it back now. 1997, it moves to Comedy Central, and it gets like 3 more seasons. How about you?
I think that is fair, especially because they'd be running his stand-up specials as well, you know, so it'd be like feeding the show. So yeah, that's definitely probably the right way to go in this format. However, if ABC wanted to save face and hold on to this and be like, okay, we made a mistake, but we want to give you what you want. You said, you know, these people that leave from Saturday Night Live, what do they go on to do? Norm Macdonald, of all people, got a standard sitcom. Phil Hartman goes on news radio. You know what I'm saying? Like this is a thing where you take these actors that are comedians, you don't give them their own sketch comedy show, you give them a sitcom. And that's what people wanted from comedians, stand-up comedians. Home Improvement, the #1 show on television, was based on a stand-up comedian, like 5 minutes of his act, you know, and now he has a whole show that runs forever. And that's what I think Dana Carvey needed. And I feel like what they should have done was they want the impersonations, right? They want the jokes based on, okay, Dana Carvey becomes another character because he doesn't have a persona. This was attempted, sort of, but actually not at all. It's what you think the movie is supposed to be. 1994, this movie called Clean Slate. Okay, I have this on VHS. This was a starring vehicle post Wayne's World, and basically Dana Carvey plays a private investigator who has a head injury. It's basically Memento. Like he can't remember what happened to him the previous day, so every time he wakes up, he's like involved. There's all these people that want to kill him. You know, the cops are depending on him, all these different things to be the witness in a case, and he doesn't remember any of it, so he just has to play along. What I thought the movie was going to be is him being a guy who basically doesn't know who he is, so he takes on a different persona every day and fits into some, you know, wacky scenario. I think we needed Clean Slate, the series. Nobody remembered the movie anyway, but if you have the right writing staff behind it, if you had somebody like a Greg Daniels, came from Saturday Night Live, came from, you know, he was Conan O'Brien's writing partner, but he goes on to create all these series, you know, Parks and Recreation and whatever, like that everybody loves, The Office, like all these things. He obviously had the chops. So if you are putting Dana Carvey in a scenario where every episode he is a guy who, I mean, he could even just be like in a Seinfeld mold. He's a stand-up comedian who does impersonations, or he's a Mrs. Doubtfire. He's a guy who does voice performance for animated features. And so he has this ability, but then he's in an accident, and then he gets pulled into these different worlds where he's just, it's almost like Bill Bixby and the Incredible Hulk. I'm pulling from so many different sources, but he's like randomly wandering from one place to another, but has to use those skills to help somebody, and he has to impersonate, somebody else. Is the premise that he's on the run? Maybe he was, like there's some mobster that's chasing him, and so he's got to like go undercover and be the characters. I don't think we need to say like he doesn't know who he is. He knows who he is, but he has the ability to be Bill Clinton for an episode or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like random characters in pop culture that people know, and maybe he has like a buddy, his sidekick is a prosthetics, again, Mrs. Doubtfire. You have Harvey Firestein type character who helps him each time. And I don't know, it just feels like we needed something along those lines where it was like there was a narrative, there was a structure, which is what primetime needs. Here's how the structure of the show works every episode, but you add in like the little bit of flair, which is what's the impersonation he's going to do this week, or he could probably do multiple in an episode, but he could maybe also be influencing that in the writer's room. Like, I want to do this, I want to include this. And I think that would have delivered what people wanted more than, well, this is Saturday Night Live, but crazier and in the wrong place. I think that's what people would have wanted at that moment.
First off, clean slate is like, hey, remember how much jumping Jack Flash sucked? Let's do that again.
Yeah.
That's what it sounds like.
Basically.
I like your idea. I do. I think what was successful for SNL alums, especially this era, because I always go back to like the bad boys of SNL, they were all kind of jerks. So it was hard to make them stars of shows. Norm kind of worked because he only did Weekend Update and Burt Reynolds. But like when you look at the ones that were successful, it's like, okay, Phil isn't the star of news radio. Spade isn't the star of Just Shoot Me. And I mean, like, Tim Meadows has killed more shows than I have toes and fingers. But, like, the trick was you never made them the star. They're just the funniest guy of the ensemble. And that would have been tough for Dana because we expected him to be the star. So I don't know if he could have done that. So he would have to do something like your show, Clean Slate the series. And I like it. It's giving me like one season NBC, but like I'd watch that before I'd watch the Dana Carvey Show.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately that's what it comes down to meet the expectation of the audience, not spit in their face when they tune into your show, and then pour water on their heads and then kick them down the stairs, which is kind of what the Dana Carvey Show was doing. So either way, it was an interesting discussion. A lot fewer laughs than people might have expected from a discussion of a sketch comedy show. But it is one of those amazing disasters, like the miscalculation on every level. That's why it's fascinating to go and check out. And if you want more details, again, you've never seen it, you can find it on YouTube, various sketches and full episodes and things like that. But also, if you have Hulu, Too Funny to Fail, you should watch that documentary because it will really just outline, I mean, even just the people involved behind the scenes, the amount of talent and what everybody went on to do. But either way, like it was just wild to see that all go the way that it did.
I feel bad though, because like I actually like thoroughly enjoyed the experience, like I fully recognize I wouldn't have liked it in 96, but like watching it now, I either loved it or I was entertained by the cringe, But it's like, it's worth people checking out. Definitely. This isn't one of those like, oh, it was canceled and I understand why. Like, I understand why, but like, I'm not going to say it deserved it. It was a miscalculation, but it's still a good, like, lost media example that's worth digging up.
Absolutely. Well, Will, we're going to dig something else up from the old days once again. We are returning to the world of sitcoms next episode as we discuss the 2 forgotten seasons, really maybe 1.5 seasons, of Double Trouble from 1984. If you've never heard about this twin-based sitcom, boy, this is going to be an awesome discussion. There is so much to dissect and pull apart about this series. I can't wait to have a conversation about a show that neither of us really are familiar with. So we're coming in with a fresh take to discover this artifact from a time gone by. But in the meantime, we want to thank you so much for checking out this episode of Remember That Show. Be sure to spread the word, share it with your friends, tell them what you like about it when you're reposting. And Will, where can people find you online?
You can find me at westweekever.com or at William B. West at all major social media sites.
And I am at Hoju Coolander, HOJUKOOLANDER. Did you catch that? Yes, on all the socials, you'll be able to find me there. But until next time, we're changing the channel.
This has been a presentation of Geekster Media.